Well, after a 2-year hiatus, I returned, recovered, and rebranded myself, but still doing reviews of video games. And what better time to return to reviewing games than in this day, Valentine's Day. Of course, I don't just think of Valentine's Day as a day for couples, but also a day for even singles for loving life itself, as well as the hobbies you love doing. And what better way to celebrate this occasion than with a retrospective of one of my favorite video game series, a certain hack and slash series taking out thousands of enemies on your quest to ruling the land. I'm RoNep MX, and this is my entry of my video game journal. Dynasty Warriors, one of Koei Tecmo's flagship games, and just recently, they released a new title in the series called Dynasty Warriors Origins, which I enjoyed immensely. Prior to the current name, the company Koei was established as far back as 1978, and before the late 90s, the company is mostly known for their strategy and simulation games, some of which actually released in the West, such as Aerobiz, which is about running an airline business, Liberty or Death, a turn-based strategy centering on the American Revolutionary War, and two of the most well-known history-based series, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, based on the novel of the same name by Luo Guanzhong, as well as the historical civil war about China's late stages of the Kingdom of Han that would eventually split the nation to the aforementioned Three Kingdoms, and Nobunaga's Ambition, which centers on Japan's warring states or Sengoku era, where multiple warlords engage in a series of civil wars in their own quest of uniting the nation. These are not your simple strategy games of sending your army to attack another, as these games, much like real-life politics, these games will require some forethought, such as reading some propositions suggested by your subordinates, and making decisions that would make your land prosperous or be led to ruin, as well as affecting your land's morale depending on your decisions made, and there will be times when you have to make tough decisions that may turn out to be unpopular, but necessary if you wish to expand your land, and ultimately conquer the nation. These are very great ideas, conveying what the player would have to think about when oneself is one's own strategist. They are great games to play, yes, but they're not the kind of genre that I would invest so much time into. Koei would continue making strategy games to this day, but it wasn't until 1996 when they also decided to explore and experiment with different genres, shocking the Japanese public when Koei announced that they would take characters from the Three Kingdoms and make it into a fighting game. Seeing as how 3D fighters like Tekken, Soul Blade, and Virtua Fighter were the talk of the gaming world, much like how companies such as Konami and Square Enix, back when they were still called Squaresoft, would experiment with other genres outside of their comfort genres, to some well-received or mixed results. For this retrospective, I'll be placing my focus on the first 8 titles in the series, as well as certain expansions whenever applicable, so some spin-offs like Dynasty Warriors Strike Force 1 and 2, as well as Godseekers, and side games like Dynasty Warriors Advance and Dynasty Warriors on PSP and its follow-up Volume 2 will be omitted from the discussion. Both Dynasty Warriors 9 and Origins will have separate full-fledged episodes of their own, and I'll be splitting this retrospective review episode into 2 parts. So for this first part of the episode, I'll start off with the 1996 game, Dynasty Warriors. Not to be confused with Capcom's Dynasty Wars, an arcade belt-scroller which also has the theme based on the Three Kingdoms. A very good game, by the way. Instead, Dynasty Warriors for the PS1 is a 3D fighting game known in Japan as Sangoku Muso, meaning Three Kingdoms Unmatched, and not to be confused with Japan's Sengoku era. It is a weapon-based fighter like Soul Blade, which was released in the PS1 months prior, but this game is not as fun as the latter. While it's impressive to see it play in 60 frames per second, it means nothing when the overall controls are very jank, and I think it might just be me, but I think every character's attacks have a delayed response to them, unlike Soul Blade where the attacks are very responsive. You do have your typical attack and defense buttons, but you can parry an opponent's attacks by attacking at the same height as your enemies, and you'll sometimes engage in deadlocks. You also have a gauge below the screen which gradually fills up and decreases over time, similar to the first Darkstalkers. And it's from that gauge that you can perform your Musou attack for extra damage. And you will be depending on it so much because regardless of difficulty, your opponents will have no problem knocking you down when you're wide open. You go through 9 stages in the arcade ladder, with your 8th match being against Cao Cao, and the final stage against the mighty Lu Bu himself, and much like in history, he's someone you just can't take lightly or else fall victim to his halberd. Once you defeat him, you get an ending of that character, but they're not really too special. There are 16 characters in the game, 4 of which have to be unlocked, usually by defeating the game with each character. The game may be a product of its time, but I'm mostly playing this for educational and historical purposes to show that Dynasty Warriors didn't start out as many would expect. Even the stages have such bland scenery when compared to Namco's fighters, and the character models were at least average for the time. That's not the only fighting game Koei would make, however, as they would also create the Strega the following year, which is an early free roamer, mostly focusing on ki blasting with some CQC in between. A very decent fighter in my opinion, but I bring this up as in this game, you can unlock the models of Dynasty Warriors as alternate costumes for this game's characters. In the year 2000, Koei would make a complete 180 for Dynasty Warriors with the release of Dynasty Warriors 2, going for a hack and slash gameplay, and it's a launch title for the newly released PlayStation 2. In Japan, it is called Shin Sangoku Musou, or True Three Kingdoms Unleashed, making it the first game in that name, but the West would call it the second game in the Dynasty Warriors name, leading to a discrepancy in title numbers for years to come. As this is the genre being used from now on, you can choose a general of a kingdom to take into battle and fight through various battles from the late Han and Three Kingdoms eras on your quest to uniting the nation under a single banner. You have your standard attacks that you can mix and chain together, as well as a Musou gauge for performing stronger attacks to take out multiple enemies or get yourself out of a messy situation quickly. The gameplay may sound simple, but it's not without some strategical elements. For the most part, your goal is to take out the opposing army's commander while also ensuring that your own commander lives. Defeat conditions come from either losing all of your HP or your commander buys the farm first before you do. You have a morale meter which determines how the battle will go, and the more enemy generals you defeat, the better chances that the battle will turn on your favor. But don't rely on it too much because your commander can still be killed at any time. Musou mode is very much arcade mode in a sense, while free mode allows you to replay a battle anytime you wish, and more can be played when you defeat that stage in Musou mode. And you'll find yourself doing it a lot because many of the characters are very underpowered, and the only way to build them up is by collecting sword, shield, or food bowl icons of varying numbers to increase your stats, because it will be difficult as soon as the second stage, especially if you run into Lu Bu by accident and will kill you in seconds, that you're better off running away from him. Because this is an early PS2 title, many major battles could not fit in this disc media at the time, so Musou mode is mostly relegated to stories for just the Three Kingdoms alone. The game has over 28 characters, and they can be unlocked by defeating the game once with different characters, or you can unlock them all with a cheat code. Unaffiliated characters like Lu Bu are only playable on free mode, but you can play any stage you like and choose a side to see the battle unfold from that army's perspective. When I rented this back in the day, I thought it was a neat game. Simple but fun in its own way, having to fight waves of enemy soldiers, powering up your favorite general, and exploring areas while also jamming to some great heavy metal, which is an interesting choice of music for this game. Though also a product of its time, it was a smash hit, and not resting on their laurels, Koei would definitely want to expand upon that with a follow-up, and in 2001, they delivered. In 2001, Dynasty Warriors 3 would be released on PS2 and on Xbox the following year. The overall gameplay has been improved with more battles, new gameplay mechanics, and the character roster now risen to 41, with 2 of the new characters, Fuxi and Nuwa, being guest characters as they are based off of Chinese folklore. Koei started to become more creative with the cast by having a good number of them wield unique weapons than just having the usual armory conventions like swords and spears. Defeating enemy generals will net you some equipable accessories that you can raise your stats or gain new weapons that can be upgraded and can hold up to a maximum of 4 levels of that weapon, though some stronger ones can only be obtained by playing certain battles in hard mode. And some horses will require you to find its harness, because if you try to hijack some horses like Red Hair for example, it'll throw you off. Many of the tracks are from the second game, but more improved with extra instrumentals, while also adding new tracks such as the song Arena, and Lu Bu has his own theme song whenever you encounter him, which is something Koei does in every subsequent game in the series. Of course, the game is also known for its really cheesy voice acting.
Feel the power of my magic!
Even though the game has more battles to fight in, despite the disc media being DVD, its Muso mode is still relegated to just the 3 kingdoms only. Regardless, it was met with positive praise thanks to the increase of content in the second game and being more refined. However, in January 2003, Koei would take the Street Fighter II route and release the PS2 exclusive Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends. It is an expansion of the original that gives several new features, such as more stronger secret weapons and items, a customizable bodyguard system, and a new Muso mode for characters that are not affiliated with any of the 3 kingdoms, sort of a hypothetical mode of how the Civil War would turn out on their perspective. You can copy whatever progress you have from the original game on the memory card and be used for the expansion, assuming if you haven't already made a save data of the expansion yet, and you have the option to load the original disc of Dynasty Warriors 3, so you can play both games in its entirety for the full experience, which is a neat concept. Admittedly, I didn't play 3 that much, not because it's a bad game, but it's only because I had a good amount of games on my backlog at the time. However, my fandom from the series would reach its high point in March of 2003 in what I considered the pinnacle of the series. Dynasty Warriors 4 would be released to the masses in March of 2003, and upon renting the game, I was definitely hooked. The overall gameplay is more refined from the last, with much smoother controls, better improvement on the morale system, and game features more streamlined. Morale can be scaled in your favor by defeating large numbers of enemies, including enemy generals, and performing some objectives like ambushes, siege attacks, and sealing enemy gates to lower their numbers. The character roster has been revamped by removing Fuxi and Nuwa from the roster to make way for 3 new characters, 1 for each kingdom, for a total of 42 characters, though the fighting styles of the 2 deities are still present in the game by way of the game's edit mode, which allows you to create your own Dynasty Warriors and assigning them either the fighting style of your favorite character or that of Fuxi and Nuwa. The Muso mode has got a complete overhaul. You still have the 3 kingdoms themselves, but as you play the stories, and taking a page from 3's Extreme expansion, you'll also unlock hypothetical stories for Lu Bu, Dong Zhuo, Yuan Shao, and the Yellow Turbans to see how their lives will play out if they had lived, or a scenario for the Nanman tribe to see what would happen if they never pledged an alliance with Shu Han at all, having more replay value. In fact, 4's Muso mode features branching paths that change based on player choices, which will ultimately affect the last stage of that act. As an example, for Act 1 of either Cao Wei, Shu Han, or Sun Wu, if you defeat the first 2 stages, then the last stage in Act 1, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, will be easier to fight as Zhang Jiao's brothers have already flown the coup prior. Or in Act 3 of Cao Wei, if you choose to immediately go after the Yuan at Guandu, in the hopes of ending the chapter early, Lu Bu will abruptly show up, making the battle much harder. Also included in 4's Muso mode are special tales, which are kind of like side chapters that are accessible by completing specific conditions during certain battles and choices that you make, and certain characters can only be unlocked in this manner. You'll have to consult a guide if you wish to know how to unlock them all, and Muso mode stage effects don't apply in free mode. Another feature in Muso mode is that the player is able to switch characters at any time during a campaign, as the mode focuses on the faction and not the individual character. And sometimes in a battle, Enemy generals can challenge the player's character to a timed one-on-one duel, should you so desire, but if you ignored it, you'll risk decreasing your army's morale. But should you accept it and win the duel, you'll increase morale and the battle continues. The battle also continues should the timer in the duel expire, but should you lose the duel itself, the battle automatically ends and the game is over. Instead of picking up weapons like in the last game, the game instead uses the weapon experience system, which you can earn from performing combos on and defeating enemy generals, and once you raise the weapon to rank 9, you can get a stronger rank 10 weapon by performing some conditions in certain battles in hard mode. The audio has also seen great additions, with an increase of new original tracks to listen to as you fight, and the voice acting has also seen some improvement, with many familiar voice actors that we would eventually come to know and appreciate, especially when said voice actors would come from the advent of Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block.
Lord Yuan Shu, I am counting on you. Farewell.
Wait, cousin. We're no match for him militarily. You, of all people, should know.
At this point, I have no need of Luo Yang. Burn the city and keep the invaders out!
But the fun for Dynasty Warriors 4 doesn't stop there, as on November 2003, Dynasty Warriors 4 would also get an Extreme Legends expansion, which has the save data importing and original disc loading features that 3 had. It has 2 new modes to play, with the first being Extreme Mode, which is sort of a survival mode going through one random generated stage after another until you drop, and an in-game shop in that mode that help your chances of survival. The second mode is Legends Mode, which has you playing a single chapter of each of the 42 characters, chronicling what these characters were synonymous for in the novel or in actual history, such as Zhao Yun famously rescuing Liu Bei's son, Liu Shan, by heading back to Changban before rendezvousing with the 3 Shu brothers. And it's only in the hard mode of these chapters will you be able to get a character's rank 11 weapon, assuming you got that character's rank 10 weapon prior. After school and during weekends, I was playing this game and Extreme Legends non-stop. So much mileage are gained from this game thanks to the refined gameplay and better features overall, and it's definitely my favorite installment in the series. And as luck would have it, another expansion of Dynasty Warriors 4 would be announced, though it's not so much an expansion as it is more of a separate game with the foundation of Dynasty Warriors 4 already set in place. So in August 2004, Dynasty Warriors Empires would be released in the West, and it does some things to differentiate itself from the original. The game combines hack-and-slash gameplay with outside of battle simulations, taken from the actual Romance of the Three Kingdoms strategy games. You can play through the game historically, or you can rule your own land and challenge other regions on your quest to uniting China as one. Before a battle, you can spend gold on random generated propositions that can help you in battle, maintain morale in your land, or forge temporary alliances with other factions. You can also choose to engage in battle to gain more land, or defend your region from invaders. When in battle, the way to win is to occupy enemy bases by decimating all soldiers of that base, and it's best if you do so first if you want an easier time before you reach the enemy commander. Certain generals can be recruited in your team either by proposition or defeating them enough times in battle, though you also have to be aware of the fact that it also requires gold to hire them. However, you'll get more propositions the more generals you have, and it's usually the only way to improve some things like items or weapons. I also enjoyed this game as well, giving me that exhilarating feeling of what it's like to be the boss of your land and what you can do to make things work. This is likely the only Empires game in the series that I'll be talking about in this retrospective, as later Empires games in the series play out similarly with one another that it's not worth talking about again, as it may sound redundant. Definitely worth checking out though. And so ends the first part of the Dynasty Warriors retrospective video. I hope you like what you see in this video, and there will be more games in the series to talk about in the next video. Until then, this has been RoNep MX, and I now close the chapter of this journal entry.